Hey guys, don't mind my dirty hands. I was working on stuff. But what I was going to tell you guys is I'm going to read chapter 16 to you guys. I want you to complete the book this week. Go ahead and read the epilogue too. There's not much of the book left. And then your test is going to be over the study guide, and I'm going to ask you to write a couple of paragraphs over a prompt that I give you in the book, and I'll give you the whole last week to do that. Sound good? All right. Well, here we go. Chapter 16, the Alaska Interior. I wish to acquire the simplicity, native feelings, and virtues of savage life, to divest myself from all the facetious habits, prejudices, and imperfections of civilization, and to find, amidst the solitude and grandeur of the western wilds, the more correct view of human nature and of true human interests of man. The season of snows was preferred, that I might experience the pleasure of suffering and the novelty of danger. That's Estwick Evans, the pedestrious tour, I don't know, of 4,000 miles through the western states and territories during the winter or spring of 1818. Winter appealed to those bored and disgusted with man and his works. If not only offered an escape from society, but also was an ideal stage for the romantic individual to exercise the cult that he frequently made of his own soul. The solitude and total freedom of the wilderness created a perfect setting of either melancholy or exhalation, and that was Roderick Nash Wilderness in the American Mind. On April 15th, 1992, McCandless departed Carthage, South Dakota, in the cab of a Mack truck hauling a load of sunflower seeds. His great Alaskan odyssey was underway. 3 days later, he crossed the Canadian border to Roosevelt, British Columbia, and thumbed north through the Shukumuk and Radium Junction, Lake Louise and Jasper, Prince George and Dawson Creek, where, in the town center, he took a snapshot of the signpost marking the official start of the Alaska Highway. Mile 0, the sign reads. Fairbanks, 1,523 miles. Hitchhiking tends to be difficult on the Alaska Highway. It's not unusual on the outskirts of the Dawson Creek to see a dozen or more doleful-looking men and women standing along the shoulder with extended thumbs. Some of them may wait a week or more between rides. But McCandless experienced no such delay. On April 21st, just 6 days out of Carthage, he arrived at the Liard River Hot Springs, a threshold of the Yukon Territory. There is a public campground by the Liard River, from which a boardwalk leads a half a mile across the marsh to a series of natural thermal pools. It is the most popular way stop on the Alaska Highway, and McCandless decided to pause there for a soak in the soothing waters. When he finished bathing and attempted to catch another ride north, however, he discovered that his luck had changed. Nobody would pick him up. 2 days after arriving, he was still at the Liard River, impatiently going nowhere. At 6:30 on a brisk Thursday morning, the ground still frozen hard, Gaylord Stuckey walked out of the boardwalk to the largest of the pools, expecting to have the place to himself. He was surprised, therefore, to find somebody already in the steaming water, a young man who introduced himself as Alex. Stuckey, bald and cheerful, and ham-faced 63-year-old Hoosier, was en route from Indiana to Alaska to deliver a new motorhome to a Fairbanks RV dealer, a part-time line of work in which he dabbed in since retiring after 40 years in the restaurant business. When he told McCandless his destination, the boy exclaimed, "Hey, that's where I'm going too, but I've been stuck here for a couple of days now trying to get a lift. You mind if I ride with you?" "Oh, Jiminy," Stuckey replied. "I'd love to, son, but I can't. The company I work with has a strict rule against picking up hitchhikers. It could get me canned." As he chatted with McCandless through the sulphurous mist, though, Stuckey began to reconsider. Alex was clean-shaven and had short hair. I could tell by the language he used that he was a real sharp fella. He wasn't what you'd call a typical hitchhiker. I'm usually leery of them. I figure there's probably something wrong with the guy if he can't even afford a bus ticket. So anyway, after about a half an hour, I said, "I'll tell you what, Alex. Liard is 1,000 miles from Fairbanks. I'll take you 500 miles as far as Whitehorse. You'll be able to get a ride the rest of the way from there." A day and a half later, however, when he arrived in Whitehorse, the capital of the Yukon Territory and the largest, most cosmopolitan town on the Alaska Highway, Stuckey had come to enjoy McCandless's company so much that he changed his mind and agreed to drive the boy the entire distance. Alex didn't come out and say too much at first, Stuckey reports, but it was a long, slow drive. We spent a total of 3 hours together on those washboard roads, and by the end, he kind of let his guard down. I tell you what, he was a dandy kid, real courteous, and didn't cuss or use a lot of that there slang. You could tell he came from a nice family. Mostly he talked about his sister. He didn't get along with his folks too good, I guess. Told me his dad was a genius and a NASA rocket scientist, and that he'd be a bigamist at one time, and that kind of went against Alex's grain. Said he hadn't seen his parents in a couple of years since his college graduation. McCandless was candid with Stuckey about his internment to spend the summer alone in the bush, living off the land. He said it was something he wanted to do since he was little. Said he didn't want to see a single person, no airplanes, no signs of civilization. He wanted to prove himself that he could make it on his own without anybody else's help. Stuckey and McCandless arrived in Fairbanks one afternoon on April 25th. The older man took the boy to the grocery store where he bought a big bag of rice. And then Alex said he wanted to go out to the university to study up on what kind of plants he can eat, berries and things like that. I told him, Alex, you're too early. There's still 3 foot of snow on the ground. There's nothing growing yet. But his mind was pretty well made up. He was champing at the bit to get out there and start hiking. Stuckey drove to the University of Alaska campus on the west end of Fairbanks and dropped McCandless off at 5:30 p.m. Before I let him out, Stuckey says, I told him, Alex, I've driven you 1,000 miles. I fed you for 3 straight days. The least you could do is send me a letter when you get back to Alaska. And he promised he would. I also begged and pleaded with him to call his parents. I can't imagine anything worse than having the son out there and not knowing where he's at for years and years. Not knowing whether he's alive or dead. Here's my credit card number, I told him. Please call them. But all he said was, maybe I will, maybe I won't. After he left, I thought, oh, why didn't I get his parents' phone number and call him myself? But everything just kind of happened so quick. After dropping McCandless off at the university, Stuckey drove into town to deliver the RV to an appointed dealer, only to be told that the person responsible for checking in new vehicles had already gone home for the day and wouldn't be back until Monday morning, leaving Stuckey with 2 days to kill in Fairbanks before he could fly home to Indiana. On Sunday morning, with time on his hands, he returned to the campus. I hoped to find Alex and spend another day with him, take him sightseeing or something. I looked for a couple hours, drove all over the place, but didn't see hide or hair of him. He was already gone. Isn't this weird that somebody who is so reluctant to develop relationships with people have such a huge impact on them? I mean, this guy knew him for a couple of days, and he just wanted to see more of him. After taking his leave of Stuckey on Saturday evening, McCandless spent 2 days and 3 nights in the vicinity of Fairbanks, mostly at the university. In the campus bookstore, tucked away on the bottom shelf of the Alaska section, he came across a scholarly, exhaustively researched field guide to the region's edible plants. Tanana plant lore, Deinania Katuna, the ethnobotany of the Deinania Indians of the South Central Alaska by Priscilla Russell Carey. From a postcard rack near the cash register, he picked out 2 cards of a polar bear, on which he sent his final messages to Wayne Westerberg and Jan Burris from the university post office. Perusing the classified ads, McCandless found a used gun to buy, a semi-automatic .22 caliber Remington with a 4x20 scope and a plastic stock. A model called the Nylon 66, no longer in production. It was a favorite of Alaska trappers because of its lightweight and reliability. He closed the door in the parking lot, probably paying about $125 for the weapon, and then purchased 400 round boxes of hollow point long rifle shells from the nearby gun shop. At the conclusions of his preparations in Fairbanks, McCandless loaded up his pack and started hiking west from the university. Leaving the campus, he walked past the Geophysical Institute, a tall glass and concrete building capped with a large satellite dish. The dish, one of the most distinctive landmarks in the Fairbanks skyline, had been erected to collect data from satellites equipped with synthetic aperture radar of Walt McCandless's design. Walt had in fact visited Fairbanks during the startup of the receiving station and had written some of the software crucial to its operation. If the Geophysical Institute prompted Chris to think of his father as he tramped by, the boy left no record of it. 4 miles west of town, in the evening's deepening chill, McCandless pitched his tent on a patch of hard frozen ground surrounded by birch trees, not far from the crest of the bluff overlooking Gold Hill Gas and Liquor. 50 yards from his camp was the terraced road cut from George Parks Highway, the road that would take him to the Stampede Trail. He woke early on the morning of April 28th, walked down to the highway in the pre-dawn gloaming, and was pleasantly surprised when the first vehicle to come along pulled over to give him a lift. It was a grade 4 pickup with a sticker on the back that declared, "I fish, therefore I am, Petersburg, Alaska." The driver of the truck, an electrician on his way to Anchorage, wasn't much older than McCandless. His name was Jim Gallion. 3 hours later, Gallion turned his truck west off the highway and drove as far as he could down the unplowed side road. When he dropped McCandless off on the Stampede Trail, the temperature was in the low 30s. It would drop into the low teens at night, and 1.5 feet of crusty spring snow covered the ground. The boy could hardly contain his excitement. He was, at long last, about to be alone in the vast Alaska wilds. As he trudged expectantly down the trail in the fake fur parka, his rifle slung over one shoulder, the only food McCandless carried was a 10-pound bag of long-grained rice and 2 sandwiches and a bag of corn chips that Gallion had contributed. A year earlier, he had subsisted for more than a month beside the Gulf of California on 5 pounds of rice and a bounty of fish caught with a cheap rod and reel, an experience that made him confident he could harvest enough food to survive an extended stay in the Alaska wilderness, too. The heaviest item in McCandless's half-full backpack was his library, 9 or 10 paper-bound books, most of which had been given to him by Jan Burris and Nyland. Among these volumes were titles by Thoreau and Tolstoy and Gogol. But McCandless was no literary snob. He carried what he thought he might enjoy reading, including mass-market books by Michael Crichton, Robert Pirsig, and Louis L'Amour. Having neglected to pack writing paper, he began the laconic journal on some of the blank pages in the back of the Tanana plant lore. The Healy terminus of the Stampede Trail is traveled by a handful of dog mushers, ski trowers, and snow machine enthusiasts during the winter months, but only until the frozen rivers begin to break up in late March or early April. By the time McCandless headed into the bush, there was open water flowing on most of the larger streams, and nobody had been very far down the trail for 2 or 3 weeks. Only the faint remnants of a packed snow machine track remained for him to follow. McCandless reached the Tecanoleca River his second day out. Although the banks were lined with jagged shelf of frozen overflow, no ice bridges spanned the channel of open water, so he was forced to wade. There had been a big thaw in early April, and breakup had come early in 1992, but the weather had turned cold again, so the river's volume was quite low when McCandless crossed, probably thigh deep at most, allowing him to splash to the other side without difficulty. He never suspected that in doing so he was crossing his Rubicon. To McCandless's inexperienced eyes, there was nothing to suggest that 2 months hence, as the glaciers and the snowfields of the Tecanoleca's headwater thawed in the summer heat, its discharge would multiply 9 or 10 times in volume, transforming the river into a deep, violent torrent that bore no resemblance to the gentle brook he blithely waded across in April. From his journal, we know that on April 29th, McCandless fell through the ice somewhere. It probably happened as he traversed a series of melting beaver ponds just beyond the Tecanoleca's western bank. But there is nothing to indicate that he suffered any harm in the mishap. A day later, as the trail crested the ridge, he got his first glimpse of Mount McKinley's high, blinding white bulwarks. And the day after that, on May 1st, some 20 miles down the trail from where he was dropped by Gallion, he stumbled across an old bus beside the Shoshana River. It was outfitted with a bunk and a barrel stove, and the previous visitors had left the improvised shelter stocked with matches, bug dope, and the essentials. Magic bus day, he wrote in his journal. He decided to lay over for a while in the vehicle and to take advantage of the crude comforts. He was elated to be there. Inside the bus, on a sheet of weathered plywood spanning a broken window, McCandless scrawled an exuberant declaration of independence. 2 years he walks the earth. No phone, no pool, no pets, no cigarettes, ultimate freedom. An extremist, an aesthetic voyager whose home is the road. Escape from Atlanta. Thou shalt not return, because the West is the best. And now, after 2 rambling years, comes to the final and greatest adventure, the climatic battle to kill the false being within and victoriously conclude the spiritual revolution. 10 days and nights of freight trains and hitchhiking bring him to the great white north. No longer to be poisoned by civilization, he flees and walks upon the land to become lost in the wild. Alexander Supertramp, May 1992. Okay, to make sure that this gets uploaded to YouTube without it screwing up or anything like that, I'm going to make this in a series of parts. So I'm going to stop here, and I'll be right back.